Hello, class. As we get into topic 3 for week 11, we're going to be looking at the whole idea of creating the message for your presentation, and then we'll look at the steps of the sales presentation, and of which the message is, message is a key part of that. In 1948, a man named David Ogilvy founded an advertising agency. It was located in New York, a company called Ogilvy and Mather. And more recently, that company name has just been changed back to Ogilvy. David Ogilvy passed away several years ago, but during his life, he made great impressions, made great strides in the advertising business. One of his main ideas that he always said was to make brands matter in a complex, noisy, hyper-connected world. He talked about brands and selling brands, creating brand names. Of course, most of what he spent his life doing in his advertising agency was paid advertising, newspaper advertising, magazine advertising, TV and radio advertising, and but only a part of that had to do with some little part of that would have had to do with the personal selling. But what I'd like to do is suggest that we take a look at, even though he didn't most of the time wasn't talking directly about personal selling, I thought we could get some ideas from him, because when we're talking about writing the message to go into your presentation, it's almost like writing a little advertisement. And so if we look at it that way, we see that there's a need to treat it like a personal, but person to person kind of advertisement. And I'm going to look at David Ogilvy's influence by looking at a number of his quotes that he's written a number of books on the topic over the years. And here's one right here, the one that you wouldn't tell lies to your wife, don't tell them to mine. That's his way of saying, whatever you say in advertising, don't tell lies. Be honest, be forward and straight up and upfront. Sorry, I was interrupted there. We have a little Cocker Spaniel who was barking, and I had to let her back inside. Anyway, let's see, I was talking about on the average that 5 times as many people read the headlines as read the body copy. When you have written your headline, you have spent 80 cents out of your dollar, is what Ogilvy says. Making a personal sale, obviously you don't have a headline, but you do have an opening line. You have an opening, you have that beginning of the presentation. And that would look at that as your headline. Look at that, the first 15 seconds or the first 30 seconds of your meeting with your prospective customer, and look at that call that your headline. How you're introducing yourself to that person, and thinking that it is like a headline. And his next quote there is, "Don't bunt. Aim out of the ballpark. Aim for the company of immortals." That's when you be positive when you go into your selling situation, and be thinking positive outcome. Whether we know it or not, how we're thinking positively or negatively when we meet people we telegraph that to them. We maybe through body language or the tones of our voice or the word or the lack of a smile on our face, we communicate to them that maybe we're here to sell, but we're not. We don't have great hopes that we'll make the sale. So aim to hit it out of the ballpark. The next quote there is that Ogilvy says is, "I do not regard advertising as entertainment or an art form, but as a medium of information. When I write an advertisement, I don't want you to tell me that you find it creative. I want you to find it so interesting that you buy the product." And what I think of here often when I think of Ogilvy, I've read a few of his books over the years, and he is in business history and advertising history. He is one of the more prominent people. So thinking of him when during at the time when there were a lot of advertising, like on the Super Bowl, where there is a big emphasis for creativity or try an art form or some unique attempts to really get attention to the advertisement. But the question sometimes is, I saw that advertisement, but I don't remember what the product was. And if you've ever had that feeling, and there's a good chance that you have, whether it was on Super Bowl ads or some other creative ad that you saw, if you find yourself saying, it was really a neat ad, and you're telling somebody about it, but you say, I really don't know what the product was, then that might be an indication that it wasn't communicating information as much as it entertained you. It was an art form. It was very creative and very artistic, but it didn't do what an ad was supposed to do. It didn't provide people with the information they need to make to make their buying decision. Next quote: tell your prospective client what your weak points are before he notices them. This will make you more credible when you boast about your strong points. Just go ahead and talk about it. Talk about your product. Talk about your service. It may have some weak points. It may not apply in 100% of the situations where the customer wants to use this product, but in a sense, maybe no product does. So why don't you be on the leading edge and get the facts out there while you're in more or less in a offensive manner, rather than later on when we would be talking about closing the sale and objections and some of these other issues that come later in the process of selling. Then at that point you won't have to be on the defensive, and so go ahead. It'll make you more credible later on. And just go ahead and note it and describe those in a best way that you can. Getting down to two more points in the list: sound and alarm. Advertising, not deals, build brands. So his comment, I think, is well taken there, in a sense that it's a matter of it's not a deal. You're not trying to, and this would get into our negotiation a little bit, our discussion of negotiation, that it's really not. We're not trying to make a deal. We're trying to get the customer to buy our brand, buy our product, because it is the one, as we've explained, meets their needs. And we're not expecting them to buy the product because our product is substandard, and we need to make some kind of a deal, give them some extra merchandise, give them an extra discount. We want to give them, through advertising, the fact that we can build the brand that way. And in our case, in our course, we substitute selling for advertising, or you might say personal selling replaces the word advertising. It's how we build brands from the way we look at it. And finally, the headlines which work the best are those which promise the reader a benefit. And that's the same thing in that would be a headline in an advertisement, but in the message that we're giving to the customer in our presentation, what we will do is we will emphasize the benefit. And that's something I'll be talking about later here. That's kind of the last section of this particular, of this topic 3. Well, going again to some of the things that David Ogilvy has done over the years. Back in 1963, a way long time ago, he developed a list of what he called the 20 most influential words, and you can look at those words and say, yes, they probably are very influential. But at the same time, you have to remember that 1963 was a long time ago, so I put the note up there that it's a good idea that there probably are some very influential words in our language, but in the year 2020, we need to take another look at that and see what are the current words. But these are the words that he said were influential back in the 60s, and we would expect to see that he used a lot of those in his in the many advertising campaigns that he had that he'd created. Some of his more famous ad campaigns, again, if you were to Google him and Google YouTubes for him, Rolls-Royce was one. He's done some recently for his company, without him, of course, has done recently for Kentucky Fried Chicken and some other current products like that. His company still is worldwide, and most of the larger countries around the world still involved in advertising. But I think the idea here is not so much to use his words. I'm not suggesting that I still think that these are the influential words to use, but I am suggesting that there probably there is a set of influential words. And I think I would like to tie this into the fact that learning the language and the lingo and the jargon of the industry that you're talking to, find out what words are influential to them, what makes sense to them, what's important to them, and then try to learn what are their influential words, not what your words are, what is influential to them. So now we're to the last section of this particular topic, and looking at the steps of the sales presentation. And so what we just talked about, the meanings that we talked about in a couple of ways, using only Ogilvy, or using Ogilvy primarily as a way to write your message. I think now we can get back to the steps and talk about the message as it is built into these particular parts of the process. So we'll be talking about building rapport. We'll talk about making a general benefit statement, making a specific benefit statement, and then the presentation, including maybe a demonstration if the product lends itself to that, and then the close of the presentation. I think before I get started with more description here of building rapport, I think it's important to keep in mind some of the other sections of Chapter 11 that talk about the presentation itself. Being appropriately dressed appropriately for the presentation, to meet the people, to meet the company that you're going to be visiting and making the sales presentation to. But also the other questions about making sure you're there on time. Those are looking at making sure that you've checked, followed up on, is the meeting still scheduled? Is the amount of meeting time that we planned, is that still going to go as planned? So if you've had a 1 hour meeting planned, and your presentation is built for 1 hour, if you arrive at the meeting and you're told that there's been some emergency in the company and you only have about a half hour, you need to decide then how you should do that. Whether you can go ahead with do you want to squeeze your 1 hour presentation down to 30 minutes, or would you be better off looking for a way and kind of get a feel for, maybe if the company and the person you're talking to has been under some time pressure, maybe they would appreciate maybe delaying the meeting, postponing the meeting, rather than just trying to squeeze it into 30 minutes, because you won't be able to squeeze your 30-minute presentation your 60-minute presentation into 30 minutes. It won't come off as planned, and you also might be doing the prospect a favor, giving him or her a little bit more time to deal with whatever emergency or whatever other time pressure incident they were dealing with. But certainly now, to kind of wrap things up, that we've talked about coming into the meeting, building rapport. I'd spend a little bit of time on this, not a great deal of time, but this is just the way people meet and greet and start meetings. Spend a little bit of time, talking about the current issues, current events, without allowing those to get, to take up too much time, but just enough to get to make a transition between you're walking in the door, the client you're talking to may have just had had a phone conference or meeting with his or her boss or with one of their customers, and so you need to provide a little bit of transition time talking about the weather, the sports. If you can get into things, get questions like sales. How are the sales now that the weather is getting better? Maybe tie, since what you're doing perhaps is related to their their ability to get sales. Then you might be able to sort of use the rapport to slide into your presentation by talking about how are sales now that the weather is getting better. So you're getting started into the business side of your conversation. You might also use something like you see a family picture in the office. You might make a comment on that. It might be about a person, maybe a son or a daughter of the client, maybe is in uniform and is a member of one of the armed forces. You might see a baseball bat or some sports memorabilia in the office, and that might make some good conversation. So anyway, that first step there is building rapport, and it is important, but it doesn't have to be too long, nor should it be. The people you're dealing with will more than likely understand that a little bit of rapport building is significant at the beginning, and then they will be ready they do this all the time, you do this all the time, and so do your rapport building and then move into the next step, which is to get right into your sales presentation by making a general benefit statement. Focus on the benefit that you can deliver. Get right into it, and don't forget the data and the analytics. Don't forget numbers and specifics, and stay away from it. While it is a general statement, you don't keep it too general. Start getting as specific in numbers. If there is a number, we can that will help them reduce their cost. If there's some known data, you can start kind of rolling that out right now and getting their attention about what your product or service is able to do for them. If you ask open-ended questions, you'll learn more about what they need and what their particular problem is, what that area of pain is that they're dealing with. Some of these examples here you see is that the closed-end questions will get you nothing more, and oftentimes anything more than a yes or no question, and you don't learn much from that. Yeah. For example, do you know who your targeted customer is? A yes or no question to that isn't going to help you move your presentation any further along. So questions such as, who is your target customer? What are your store hours? I checked recently. You still keeping how? Why do you have that particular set of store hours? You might have noticed that maybe their store hours depart a little bit from the competitors, and so use that as a way. It shows them that you researched their website and found out maybe their store hours or other issues, and now you're getting into that a little bit further. When are you planning to launch the new software, the new product, the new whatever it is you're there to help them with? You're there with some products that might be useful in their warehouse. And by the way, where are your warehouses located, and are there any particular situations dealing with their locations that might be significant? It might be they're near a freeway, or maybe they're not close enough to a freeway to be efficient in terms of transporting their goods from say a warehouse to their stores if they're in the retail business. Why are you considering a change? So they're talking to you. Let's assume that what you're selling them is they're now using from a different supplier. You would be a new supplier, a new vendor for them. You're curious, why are you considering changing, whether you're changing to our company or to another one? What are those issues? So those open-ended questions will give you a lot of information, and I will say that, let's say in the worst case scenario, if you don't get a sale from this company, you will have, that'd be the worst case. I mean, your case, you're hoping to make the sale, but you will walk away with a lot more understanding about what that industry is all about. And you will have some information that, you'll be able to use, again with another prospect. But however, we're still positive about this particular prospect. Then there is the step three, which is make a specific benefit statement that, say back, repeat back to them, confirm back that you understand that the prospect's problem or main pain point. Demonstrate how you're going to solve your prospect's problem or address the pain point. So just be very clear about that. First, just so I understand, just to confirm, you're open to considering a new coffee option if you can maintain the quality and flavor of your current coffee and pay a lower price. Is that what I'm hearing? That where we are so far? And then the customer might say, yes, I'll hear what you have to say, but our standards are very high and the savings would have to be significant. Okay, so then you can come back and then, okay, so then you affirm that you understand that. See that you've got you're down to the facts here you're in the middle of your presentation. You're moving through, you're not quite to let's say the midpoint of your presentation yet, but you're collecting information, you're getting affirmation, you're getting confirmation, you have a conversation going here, and you each know what's going on. There's no misunderstanding so far. You don't want to get to the end and then have some say, oh, I misunderstood that. You don't want to get to that point. Those are too hard to recover from. So you get to the maintain understanding, short questions, short answers, confirmation of what you hear. And then you say there in the end, in this example up there on your screen, I understand. If I can save you 5% annually on your coffee costs, will you consider switching? Okay, that's where you can feel yourself moving from presentation into getting very close to pulling out your order book and writing up the sale. That's where you're headed. You're not there yet, but that's where you're headed. So you've got those. You don't have the order book out yet because you still have the presentation. You've just got agreement on things up front there. You're gonna fill in all the details, all the everything, dot all the I's and cross all the T's. You're going to keep it short. You're going to get reactions as you go. You're going to interact with your customer. You're going to make your idea come alive with storytelling. You're going to have, if you're an experienced salesperson with this product and with the kind of customer you're dealing with, you hopefully will have a story to tell, perhaps a recent success story. This is a storytelling about successes with your product and maybe some interesting highlights. Maybe you can be a little bit humorous, but yet accurate as you go through telling a story here at this time about your product, and hopefully it'll be about your product and how it's been successful with another company, another client. You'll use demonstrations and samples or mock-ups or whatever interactive techniques that you use. Don't rush into any of those quickly unless you see there is time. Sometimes demonstrations can take more time because it might require, plugging in your computer, getting something out of your sample case, setting up something. If you don't have the time, then don't decide whether that'll make a difference. And if it takes time, if it's going to take time, if it makes a big difference, then it might be worth the time. If it's just a way for you to, if you're not thinking, you don't have too much else to say and you're going to demonstrate, try not to do that. You try not to use a demonstration in that place, because a demonstration, while you think it speaks for itself, it doesn't always do that. You have to speak for it. You have to talk about cost. You're getting to places now where you need to talk about dollars and cents. And sometimes a demonstration by itself won't do that. It takes your words to affirmatively and confidently give that information to the client. You're getting close to the close, the trial close, or a close where you're asking the customer now, hey, well, it seems like we've been doing pretty good here. You like our product. I like to have you as a customer. Let's, what do you say we talk business? What do you say we try to write up a sale? Let me just say this, that we will talk more about that in a couple chapters down the road. In chapter 13, we're going to talk about the closing and the trial closing. But the close would be the next step after the presentation. And finally, we're going to do it's a recap where you summarize what you've agreed to, and hopefully you have come to some agreements. But in any case, you're going to recap everything you did during this. Let's say it's been a 1-hour sales presentation. You're going to recap that. No matter how far you got into the process, you're going to recap that. You're going to hopefully have some, try to get to some action steps. If you didn't get the sale, then you didn't make the sale. You didn't write up the order. You didn't make arrangements for that. But you got to, whatever that point was, get an action step like that you agreed that you're going to call back tomorrow, or the customer is going to call you back, or something's going to happen. But make sure there is something left on the to-do list, some action step. A final step that we're going to talk about in this particular topic for today would be the sales proposal. If you get to that point, in that it's a summary of what you're suggesting, and it's going to be a written summary of a statement of what the prospect's need is. So remember, when you were talking about and you were affirming and verifying what the prospect needed, or what he or she needed as a consumer, or what he or she needed on behalf of their company. Hopefully you're paying attention to that, and you have made some notes, and you have some information that you're going to be able to put their need in a fairly specific, in very specific language, a specific statement of their need. A statement following that is a statement of your solution and the benefit. Their need, your solution, and the benefit it'll provide in solving that need. Then you will have pricing and any other costs very specifically stated, leaving nothing to guesswork or nothing to chance. The actual costs. When the coffee example there, it was that if you were the salesperson and you talked about they could save 5%, work out the numbers, give a very detailed list of costs and expenses, and to show how they're going to save the money that you said they could save by buying your product. Talk about a time frame for implementation. It may have something to do with your product or service may be coming in after a contract that they have with their current vendor runs out. So if that's the case, be very clear and find out when that contract ends. Use your start date as, to start right when the other contract ends. Your contract starts right after that. But be very specific about the time frame, and tie it to the discussion that you had in terms of when they were ready. So that gets back to some of those questions in the presentation, is when will you be ready to make the change? And that's why that question is in there, because that is important to answer the question is what is the time frame for implementation. It would be a call to action, get ready to, the contract, whatever specifics need to be put in writing. Do they need, does this contract with them that they want to have with your company, does it have to be approved by their home office in Omaha, New York, St. Louis, wherever, Phoenix, wherever it is? Kind of find out about that and get some action going on that. Find out, can our contract people talk to your contract people, and what are the appropriate names and phone numbers so that we can get that started. Finally, evidence that you and your company have solved the problems like this before. this is your kind of your parting discussion in that we're looking forward to doing with your business. We've done similar things with similar companies. They have liked what we've done for them, and we're sure, and I'm sure you'll like what we can do for you. That's kind of let's leave it on a high note. So, well, that ends the topic of this particular topic for our discussion for now. And then we have one more for this week. That will have to do with one of them we'll be talking about negotiating for success. That'll be topic 4 for this week. So I'll come back and be posting that later on. Thank you.